Okay, so I needed to make a video because it's bothering me. Sometimes I think everyone can hear my thoughts or figure it out and be like, oh, okay, he knows or whatever. But this has to do with Julian's identical twin. I don't know if there was a third one. If there was a third one, the only reason I think there's a third one is because when I was in Alaska and I went out to the, what was it? I think it was like near the airport somewhere, or not really close, but it was pretty far. It was a little bit south, a few miles, a number of miles. And I talked about that I went on this trail for like 10 hours and I was exhausted, and I decided to take this sort of detour area closed off just to kind of be adventurous. And I came across this open field, and it was just eternity. It's what it looked like. If I could probably think of eternity, that's what it looked like. And it wasn't there. There was like a very maybe what there was like there wasn't an ocean of water, but it looked like a foot of just mud and water. And it was just plush with grass, and it was like a dirt motorcycle area. But anyway, I talked about I took pictures and I was just taking the breeze in. It was just so beautiful. And there was three guys that showed up. There was one, then two, then there was three, and they kind of looked like they were brothers, or they were I knew they were friends, but I just got this impression that they were brothers. But anyway, I thought maybe there was a third one. If there was a third one, then I don't know what to even say. I don't, because there was, if there was a third one of Julian, like Julian was a triplet, then there was nothing at all about this person. There was only the reference of the one that was Garland. But the reason I wanted to go discuss is about his identical twin, where he was transferred, where he was placed, is because, okay, this goes back to when I was in 7th grade in my history class, in Coach Burns' class. And this is the only time I ever played football. And I talked about before I had nosebleeds, and this is where I think that because the nosebleeds, regardless if you're very skinny, the blood clots still pretty much in the ratio of the same way to a fat person or to a very bodybuilder. It's a little bit better, or give or take here and there, depending on genetics. But if you're average, and if you're, because there's a lot of real skinny guys, they're still very healthy, they're just skinny, and fast metabolism. But this is why I think that this is where initially it could have started, because I remember having and I was a cardio runner, and I hadn't been smoking that much. I was very young, and this is why I believed that had happened. But anyway, I wanted to say, when I was in my history class in 7th grade, I had a class with this guy named there was one of the other kids was what's his not Armando. I was going to speak about Armando, but Aaron Mendoza. He was I think in that class as well, I recall. But and I know he used to have a lot of conflict with him and Armando Alvarez, which is, I don't know if he's a transgender, and I think the only reason I think he is because one day we were in that class, and Aaron Mendoza was like joking. He would love to push people's buttons and start shit. He was just like really pushing everybody's button. I mean, he'd like to not pick on them, but he'd push people's buttons. He was not scared of people bigger than he was at all. And so, he said something like walking down the hall, and he said something like, Armando's a girl. He's born a girl, or he says something, and I know that he was throwing, like, they would kind of throw sucker punches at each other, and they were big guys. Armando Alvarez was huge Mexican kid for his age, and strong for his age. He's bigger than any of the kids. But I say this because maybe he could have been talking about somebody else when he said that, but I was in my class, and Coach Burns' class, in history class, and I talked about Coach Burns. He goes, "Good job, Hector," and then he goes like this, and he's sort of military. He seems pretty military about it, because I remember being in that class one time, all the students, because everybody was like throwing paper planes. It was kind of It was that kind of class where people are throwing paper planes and sticking gum underneath the desk and playing football, paper football and stuff like that. And he screamed out one day, tell everybody to sit down. He sounded like a general, like he sounded very much like a, the way he said it was like military sort of. And everybody stayed quiet. You never saw him yell or anything. So, and he turned like red hot, pissed when he got mad. When he got mad, you could tell he was pissed. Like his skin, like he was gonna fucking murder people or some shit. But anyway, we were in that class, and there was just this one time that I want to say that he just looked over directly at me. And you got to keep in mind that you can tell when a teacher has some sort of, they're focused on you or have their intention on you, whether you're doing your work or bad or whatever, or throwing paper planes, or an interest of this kid's a little bit better kid, or he's a cooler kid among the other kids, you just get along with the teacher better. But he looked at me, and this is where I think he was doing an investigation. He looked at me, and Armando Alvarez he's a barber now, and I got my hair cut by him about 7 years ago. But I didn't know this, and Eder was there. He also went to be with Perry. And he pointed over at Armando Alvarez, and he just looked at me, and he goes like this, and he goes, and then that's all he did. And I remember Armando kind of looked, and he said, "What?" And he didn't say anything. So, who and how what do I think of that? Well, I know this is a really far shot, but is it possible that this person is associated somewhere with maybe that Julian's identical twin got sent to his mother or relative, that's where the hideout was? That's how Julian's twin got abducted? Because one of the reasons it increased the ability for me to believe that was because, one, I got my haircut with Eder over at the barber shop, and they don't let me talk to any friends. All the friends and people that I was social as I was, they don't let me talk to any of them. And for some reason, they shut the doors on me, and all these different things that was going on. I was just thrown to the streets. But for some reason, him and just a handful of people were I was allowed to associate. Why of all random people? And I'm talking, and I noticed that he had a lot of tattoos, gave me a haircut, and he was real good friends with Eder, and they were planning on opening up their barber shop. And to me, in my impression, he knew about me being raped or having sex with a transgender. So this is one of the reasons that I know this sounds like it is a pretty far shot, but I'm thinking that this is the person that has some kind of association with Julian's identical twin. And it happened very fast. All he did is he didn't say one word. He was talking history class, and everybody was throwing paper planes, and then he'd stand up in the middle of class, say a few words, go back to his desk, and it was one of the easiest classes I ever had. I mean, we hardly ever did any classwork in that class, but he just looked, and he just goes like this, and he looked over at me, and Armando, I don't know who he is, and Armando's like, "What?" And he looks over at me, and I was pretty quiet, but I just looked at him like, I don't know. I'm sort of thinking of that, but there could have been, obviously, if the discussion of the dead little girl is in discussion, obviously if the girl is if the topic is about this dead little girl, when I'm working out and lifting weights with Cisco, John DeCilli, Richard Murphy, I think Nick Herrera, I want to say it was usually us three when we worked out after class or after school after 4 o'clock, and we go for 30 or 40 minutes and get a workout. But it's the only reason I think that, because he asked me, and he said, "Do you have a sister?" He goes, and I go, "Yeah." And I told him, and he seemed like his posture and way seemed to be very investigating, like thinking of information and details about, okay, I got this information now, I got to puzzle something else. Okay, I got to think of something else, and that's kind of what's going on. So this is why one of the reasons now I start playing these videotapes in my mind and start thinking to myself, I think this person is. I think this person, because I wasn't good friends with Armando, and see, there's a lot of these details I don't talk about. Like, I joked around with a lot of times, and he was kind of a funny person in class. Very kind of, he was actually really funny, sort of the entertainer of the class at times. Um, but he wasn't a bully, and I just noticed that he was kind of a class clown, and he was the only kid sitting at that desk, and for some reason the teacher let him there. I don't know. So I thought I would say this because I think it's a long shot, but it may be connected to it. Somewhere I think that this connected, and also the reason I think of this is because I saw a picture of Armando where he was burying his mother, and it was all orange. And I looked at the pictures, and his mother looked like a transgender with two sets of twins. And I thought to myself, he said, what most people say when they lose somebody they very dearly, and so the color orange, modifications of pictures they do, AI, and all these different things. I think it's probably worth me saying something. Because there's no telling. There's absolutely no telling. There's so many problems with what happened to Julian, and as I did, that's 10 to 15 years of a child being born into a family, snatched and kidnapped, and all of a sudden that happens. You can't give that back, and the fact that somebody, whoever the psychologists are, it wasn't going to go well with giving my mother a house and all these things, and with the gay community and transgender. It wasn't, you're giving my mother is nothing more than a butchered cow, and all she's worth is for her vagina to shit out kids and then use her as an emotional vessel to weaponize her own children and me and anything else that benefits them. As my mother benefiting me, herself, Julian, Frankie, me, in our circle only, she's not allowed to. She don't do shit or own shit, and she didn't. So other people got involved. You know the rules. Smart as a bag of rocks. Brains like Sarah and Ken and that family, and the Cooper family, and everyone else. Well, and White, you know how to play the chess match. You know the chess match. Who always wins, and who's stronger. And so that's the way that it goes. But I thought, I don't have any frustrations and anger because there's too much information I don't know about. There's just too much. It's easy for me to get angry because life passed by and it's over. You don't get the time back, you don't get your money back. It's psychology, it's acceptance, it's all these things. And that's why it's a measurement tool. It's their measuring ruler, not mine. And I have to believe and do it by what they say, because the loss I had is much more greater than an understanding. Somebody that, loses $1 million and they're only making $30,000 a year, that's very painful. Or somebody else could be making, $40,000, and they lose $1 million, and it's a lot even less painful than the first one. And for somebody that's making $20,000 and loses $1 million, it could be so painful they commit suicide. So that's what I had to say about that. And there was also, it's just a suggestion, there was also something else I wanted to talk about, which was my mother seemed to say some things about, they always do the psychology shit, and I was thinking, there was this guy, Sokon, Cambodian, and he was a really fast runner. He's Barry Pan's uncle, and they're Cambodians, and he used to bring this guy over, and I saw him at a party, and this happened a long time ago when we were all drunk and stupid, but when I grew up with this guy, they used to call me Mojo, like, they used to say the most racial shit you could ever imagine, like, all the fucking time. I wasn't, like, really close friends with them, like, they would bust your bubble very quickly. You barely knew them, and they call you wetback. Hey, who brought that wetback in the house? Like, They would say the most racist shit you could ever imagine all the time to me. I was like 11 years old, like 10, 11 years old. I used to go to Barry's all the time and break dance and play video games, spend the night and go to Saturday night out and go hang out with friends and Daniel and so on. So when we used to go over there all the time, for a period of time we were like best friends, before a lot of the high school friends showed up, we got really popular. So, but I do recall that this guy by the name of Andy, and I don't know if SoCon is gay or not. I'm pretty sure. I think he is. Yeah, in fact, I know he is. But he had a bad mouth. He was a frustrating person that he was not scared of a lot of people. Like, there was a lot of people that he would come across. He wasn't very scared of them at all. He'd see what's up with them. I seen him actually grab a gun in our backyard, in Barry's backyard, just to try out a gun in front of me when I was with Barry, and I think I was with Vandy, and he got a gun and he was right in front of the nursing home where my dad was going to be placed at. But this is before his suicide. And he gets a gun and he just wanted to try out the gun and he didn't know where to go, and he wasn't pissed off or anything like that. And he got a gun and he BAM! And he shot the gun toward the tree, and it's stuck in the tree. And it was this massive tree. It didn't go through and it was like I want to say it was like a 345 or like a 45, I think it was. And it looked like a medium powerful size gun, handgun, and it seemed like the guns that were probably more popular back then in drive-by shootings. It was silver, if I can remember correctly. But anyway, there used to be a guy that used to come over, Andy, and he stayed there for like several months, and they're like, he's going to R.L. Turner at the time, and they're 16 years old, and I don't know what SoCon's family was like, but he seemed to be thrown to the curb and thrown away. And I do recall that this guy Andy always used to talk about wanting to kill himself. And SoCon would say something, "Oh, listen, man, you stupid man, you need to stop saying that shit." And if you talk to this Asian guy and knew this guy, he sort of seemed like he meant it. And he, I don't know if he seemed to be in an extreme emotional distraught about his life, and he was young too. He was like 16 years old, 17. He would joke around, but he had talked about that several times, and had said something of things about. I think he said something about like hanging himself, or he had tried to, and then SoCon saved him, or it was something like that. But I know this guy was, from what I recall, was very suicidal. But it wasn't in a way that you would watch people like on 911 phone calls and shit, hold knives to their throats and say, "You move any closer, I'll fucking kill myself." It wasn't that kind of attitude. It was like searching for attention, and it was like so just really lost in the world. Like, this world is so fucked up, and he didn't have, like, whatever happened also with his family, it had to have been really bad. But he always acted very cool though. Like, he always strutted like he was like Asian boy, like representing Asian boys, like it was very prideful of Cambodian, very prideful Cambodians. The Cambodian pride was very, very strong anytime I was around that family, especially the young guys. They hang out with the Mexicans and they were cool, but like it was very common, where the white boys were really part of this crew because, it was just a different side of the fence. But they were very prideful that the Cambodians had something very powerful to represent. It goes along with religion as well because, that family, I had been around them before, how they had people persecute them because they were, they were raised Buddhism and cultures, and you could see their, it was the most Asian Cambodian culture in the beginning I had, or any point ever in my life, where, you could see how they dressed, where they almost had like monk kind of clothing. I think, they had kind of, the grandma showed up and she had that kind of, outfit, and I think I might have even seen a distant friend of a friend or a family come over and they were a monk, but we were just kids, and they went to like temple, and I never brought up religion. I just did ask them why they weren't Christian, or are they Christian, because I don't know. There are people that convert or the people that accept, but I didn't understand, because at that time I was kind of like, I understand people are different, but why this is so much separation of religion. So I told him I did, but I thought it was important for me to say, because my mother said something about, oh, no se puede go. And it's always all these hints, and it's always these suggestions of that I think of them slowly letting me know this information to keep me busy, or to keep me worth high in my value of whatever psychology they're doing, because I really didn't not really doing much other than making model ships, and they're controlling me to what I need to place on there, what I need to do with that. I haven't got much work on my GED, and don't know if I will complete that while I'm here, or at least maybe get one test done, or maybe all of it. I don't know now, but I'm really just trying to enjoy myself and be in the best company, and stay in a positive attitude, and just content, and do what I want to do. But it's difficult, because circumstances. There's nothing I can do. It's just it was a tragedy. It was a tragedy. It wasn't a roller coaster of emotions and anything. It wasn't as much as celebrities that I watch on TV all the time, and you see Taylor Swift or Avril Lavigne, or you see whoever it is, and these new movie stars or these older ancient ones, that's not me. It's whether the delusion of thinking that they're mentioning me or have some sort of interest is very, very short-lived, because I see very small clips of them, but that's not me. I don't make the movies. I'm not an actor. I don't, none of that world. Whether it's A-Track defending Kenneth all the time and supporting Kenneth Cooper and, the gays or whatever it may be, or trying to make it look like it's a balance, or it's, another DJ claiming they're doing this, or producer that's really top, and they sort of use their platform for power. That's not me. I'm not the one getting in an airplane, traveling around the world, eating caviar, and then throwing money to the homeless, and then looking pretty on stage like Taylor Swift, and then acting humble. But, you really don't have a choice. It's just a different journey. You can't blame somebody because they lived royalty their whole life, and you can't blame somebody because they make excuses. Oh, but let me tell you my torture too, because I'm Mariah Carey, or whatever it may be. There's just so many different directions. It doesn't change the fact that that's not me. That's not what I'm doing. It's entertaining at times, sometimes a little motivating, but it's very cheap and very short-lived, because you got to keep in mind, I understand, I don't know these people personally in any kind of way. I don't know who they are, and because I read a book about them doesn't mean I personally attach myself to them. I don't know who they are. You don't, sometimes you don't even barely know our brothers like myself or my sister, let alone there's so many problems all around the world and all in the U.S., people suffering and suicide and pain and suffering, and who gets the royalty. It's a feast of who lives on the top of everything, and it's very cheap-lived. There's nothing glamorous about what's really happening. It's very short-lived, and it's very cheap, very dirt, nasty cheap. And they're the ones that have all that money, and they're the ones that have all that glorious fame, and how painful it may be at times, and that they wanted it and they got it. That they did live that. I didn't. That was not my life. That wasn't a story that I had. So, I thought I'd kind of vent out about that sort of subject, because I know that there's a lot of people get affected by it. With the whole president and all this other shit, and It's a basically a hyena's going after a little baby impala, ripping the shit out of it, just whatever they want, and the smartest only live and paramount, and the weak die off. It's the crocodile in the fucking water that waits for the fucking cheetah and just snatches it when it doesn't even. I mean, you don't even know when it's approaching you that that's how good they are, and they take down it's horrific. You see the antelope and stuff. It's just like that in human nature. It's more loving, but it's just very much like that. The supremacy of the fittest, and brain function, and how smart you are, and how powerful you think you are, and all these different things, and you apply that with different spectrums of all these different people. That's why you have to have Jesus in your life and God, because that's the only way you can properly divide. Even however small or larger portion that may be for someone else and for yourself. It's to have some sort of understanding, because human beings don't know how to function. And people are dying all the time. I can go down the street to a gas station for, I don't know, I think the last time I picked up the newspaper was like $1.50, and that was like 20 years ago, or something like that. And, for probably less than $5, I'm sure for like $3 you can get, the packet of newspaper. And you go through the obituaries, and you'll find in Dallas, this is just Dallas, and it's just every week there's a whole list of people that died. This one died this one was, 25, most of the people are old, you find, and those are, and I don't even know, I'm pretty sure that all the people that do pass away don't even make it to the obituaries. I think there are a number of people that don't get placed in there, that don't, for some reason. I don't know if it costs money, or it's lawfully ordered, or they ask for someone, for either if it's a murder or whatever it is, that they don't put them in there to let people know. Whatever that situation is, sometimes they don't even make it, and there's just every week, all these people are dying all the time. And, that's part of the nature of it. And I'm no different than one of these numbers that you'll find in this obituary. Someone living $1 million and say, oh, okay, well, somebody going to do American flag patriot, and they kill me and my mother. Isn't going to do shit, American flag again. It ain't survival of the fittest. You rip the impala out of the mother's vagina as she's giving birth, and you see the hyenas just ripping the shit out of it open. One grabs one leg and one gets another turkey leg, and it's not even fully out of the mother's womb when she's giving birth. That's nature, and that's what human beings do. We just put excuses to it to say that it's something else different, to live on the top of everything again, all over again. So, obviously it's more loving and more kind than animals. We're a different species, but I was something that I was used to, and some of the workers at my job site used to piss me off when I used to do this. But when I used to work at Standard Register, they used to put the obituary. There's one, I think it was T-Bone that used to do this shit, but there was this one guy, there was a couple of guys that they didn't like me and I didn't like them. And, it was sort of this whole rivalry shit, and obviously I was I was the fucking nobody there, and they used to put the obituaries in the fucking break room. And all the newspapers and all the shit, they would, occasionally you see some coupons here and there, but they would fucking separately just put the obituaries, and they would set it on the fucking table. Sometimes a lot where I always sat in the same place, in the same desk area, where I was always resting and falling asleep because of plastic anemia. But even at times I'd eat my sandwich, have my normal 2 sandwiches, chips, and a soda, and then go out, or some Gatorade, and go back to work, But every time I showed up, they would intentionally put the obituaries there, and it was just I had a habit to start just going through them and just watch to see how every week there's just all these people, it's a common thing, but I obviously it can really be, very touching, but, it's too much of a fantasy world is very toxic, and maybe that's more the devil's food. You know, you get too much of it, and it's no good. You get too much of anything, it's not good. And not even if you don't get too much of any of it, some of that is really bad, and it's not meant for good at all. And it did more bad than any good, and it can be very little. It can't be controlled very well at all. And who runs that world? And who? Because once the killing is done, once the dismemberment is done, once they've executed the AIDS virus, once they've done the rapes, once they've got the young women, or once they raped the boys they wanted, you know, once they got that career they wanted, it's too late. You can't go back to that anymore. The same way, the difference is they got it. I didn't. That's their life and their business, and they're going to die too and end up in those obituaries just like me. But they just got it better than I did in most cases. Different circumstances, different brains, different people. And more likely than most people are not able to, or don't want to be calculating with that. They're just, working celebrity. I have no idea what's going behind those scenes and what's really happening, and who the majority of that is, and who's controlling the women and doing that. And same thing goes for porn industry. Porn industry, like, I don't hate the guy. I saw my sister Michaela, for a moment, and I don't know if that was her or not, but it was. In fact, I'm 100% that was her. But they're doing so much AI graphics, and they're doing so many things that I don't think that this could have not been her. It could have just been her face and her body, because they're doing so many tricks and so many things. But it was her, and it was that guy that I saw at the porn industry. And one thing I want to say is I don't hate that guy. The guy that I saw, it's because I know the difference. I used to hang around a friend of mine that was hung. Okay, I mean, girls and other people had said this, and guys in the shower. And even as a kid, I knew this, but I didn't have any interest, and he was a best friend of mine. And I would be around him, and there would be 25, 35-year-old women look at a 12-year-old boy, and they wanted his dick. And they could tell that he was hung. And I was this puny guy with them, and I'd always be like, all right, let's go to CC's. All right, we go to CC's, and women would just look at him like he was a genetic specimen. And he was so passive about it at times, he didn't realize how much of an observer I was. They always saw him as a genetic specimen of like Hercules and Gladiator, very physically. They always did. And I watched this happen all the time. So, and I've been around, situations enough to understand, that's what women want at times. They don't, they know what they're going after, and they know by looking at a guy's size about what he's packing, and what they're more interested in and what they want. It's not just necessarily the height and genetics for babies, it's for pleasure. So, and as far as that guy, they abuse them guys, I'd never seen him in one of those professional videos either. He looked like it was more like a bedroom sort of DJ kind of thing. Like he was just making his own vids in his room kind of deal. None of it looked high fashion popularity, and he was having sex with black women too, which is extremely unlikely for a white guy, especially a white guy like that. For some reason, you won't ever find that. White guy sleeping with a black girl. So anyway, but I don't know. I know this guy's seen a number of his videos and whatnot, but God forbid that was her. It wasn't her in that video, but was it AI? Was it graphics that they did? Could have been just to fool me. Maybe it was someone else that did it, and they just changed the bodies and body parts. But that's what I have to say. I hope to God and I pray to God that didn't happen, but it's very likely that it did. It's very likely that it did. It's very likely that something like that happened, and it's very likely that the sabotaging happened. It did. And they're smarter. They knew how to be smarter in the beginning to overlay it, because they're not going to pay for it. You got to understand, There are people, I understand that there are people in this world that are your family members at times, or even distant friends, that have no problem sitting in a place like this and just harming your life and making it about them and what they want to do, and they know how to do it because they practice that like Sarah Cooper their whole life, and they think and they do this and then they make excuses and they jump. They're gonna. It's so selfish on such a scale of pig that it's hard to describe that, because I didn't grow up from that, and you know, um, just such an innocent person that, once they know how to transform it, it's masterminded. It's gutted out just as Frankie's ass got ripped open. That's exactly his laughter, you know. So, and the people that they send and the brainwashing techniques they do to me, because it'll eventually go away. If it doesn't, then I'll go to my grave that way, and it'll go away then, and then it'll go away with Jesus Christ, and that's the only way it's ever going to be. So, I don't hate the individual, because there are women. No, that's only what they wanted, and I do believe, in my opinion, even though a woman's chemistry changes when she loses her virginity, a woman's chemistry changes also when she also has, obviously, that type of, stimulation of size. But also when she has a tremendous amount of partners, it does change. But I don't believe that it changes and harms more than it does the male. Like it sort of exhausts the man when you do that. I think that it does, because women, I think, are a lot more tolerable, because it's not just an opinion or just a spiritual viewing of it. It's also because prostitution was in Jerusalem. Prostitution was the oldest trade of work from the beginning of time. And so, just like if human beings started eating grass for decades and hundreds of years, we would build a tolerance to that. It's through genetics and developing and growth, just like the fish that grows wings and the fish that grows little tiny legs to be able to run across some land to then get to another pond. It's the evolution process. But I think in my opinion that it does affect a man when you have a lot of sex partners. When you have a lot of sex partners, like, it really messes you up really bad. It really messes you up pretty bad. But like I said, I don't know what that agreement is with financial money, TV, or just the separation. But, it's very likely that if something like that happened over someone else, that he was arranged, without a doubt, just like they did to me, because as soon as they found out, what they did to me. Michaela's 15 years old. She's 16 years old and going to Creekview High School. And what happens then? She looks like a model-looking girl, and here comes white supremacist. Oh, and it sucks. And it's very much like that, because then it wipes my dead sister out, wipes my biological father to say, oh, have another kid with someone else and make him Mexican. Oh, but I'm white over here too. Oh, but Ken Cooper's white over there too. And it doesn't change the difference. Doesn't change the difference, that, I'm not connected to these people, and I didn't experience life with them. And I didn't experience the beauty that could have unbelievably been beautiful as a brother and sister growing up in my 20s and 30s. It would have been great, because I used to see that with Alicia and Robert all the time. Robert died a long time ago. One of my best friends, he died a long time ago. And I used to see that relationship that was very much like how I wanted something to be like, or I'd seen other kids with a brother and sister, and how that would have been very beautiful to grow up in, to be able to, she has girls and stuff and friends that I can meet, and who she thought I would be good for, and introduce me, or she could I could learn a lot of things from a blood sister. And not only that, how many people have a sister that is a model looking like that? How how many people have a sister that looks like that? How many of them? Very few. And out of all the world's of craziest things, I never thought something like that could have happened. And there I have a model-looking sister, and it's like, oh wow, but I'm 40 years old now. I'm old now. I got a lot of gray hair, and the time has passed. And that was the beauty of the pain of the devil's work, evil work of others, to make excuses here, make excuses there. Don't give him money. I don't care. World Trade Center, American flag, American soldier, and it just goes on to garbage. There was no reuniting of anything until it was too late. And then there's psychology and perceptions and new learning techniques, but it's your youth is your prime. But they know what they're taking away, and they know when they do it, and they did. So, but as far as anything else goes, there's also another thing I wanted to talk about. And I, like I said, if he did do that and it was all intentional, then it's fire on his stick in his ass. Kill him, skin him. I mean, but I don't think that was the case, because being a straight guy in this world, how many of them are in Hollywood? They put this guy over there to work in a pig stack, whatever he chose. And I think he was a bartender at one time. But you gotta understand, why aren't they putting these straight guys over in Hollywood and giving them these opportunities, just like they do the girls? But it's easy to go blame that world, because we're the breeders of this world. We're the ones that make babies. We're the ones that make kids in this life. The gays, they could be over there, but that's all you're doing is pleasure. You ultimately don't get out of that and then just start having babies because you're gay or transgenders. That's the women. And even the women that get into that, it's different points of views, but you understand what's going on in Hollywood and all these royalty winnings, that's all controlled and confined. They're the showrunners. They're the showrunners. The straight community ain't running shit, because it's very low bonded, and it's very low bonded understanding. The community is the tightest organization all the way to the White House. That's all that's there. And majority runs. My uncle Richard told me, he said in New York, that's all that's there. And he almost flat out said it in those words. He goes, power in numbers. We run everything. Everything. I saw this behavior when I was in high school and middle school, when my friends started coming over, and I could see how the bonding started happening. I was excluded for being straight and treated that way, especially the DJ world, when all the friends came over and they would watch them do all this gay secret shit. And I didn't know exactly what they were doing, and I didn't understand the bond, but I knew that it had something to do only within them. I'd see, Eric do to Michael, Michael do to Eric, Chris do to Michael, and David, Bird, or all these other people would do it, and it was really them. I was included because it's just like, he's a straight guy, yeah, but he's friend, he doesn't know, we could just keep fooling him, or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but it was so much on them. I was the only person, and it's the same thing in the entire DJ world, producer world. It's just that we're responsible for making the babies and all this and that, but I could go into a whole lecture on that, but that's that. So, but there's also another thing I want to talk about that came across my mind that I never talked about with Casey Rickles, who passed away from a drug overdose. I don't know if she committed suicide. I don't know what the situation is. They sent her kid a card, her husband. I think he said it was in the Navy. But, okay, look, this is, all in respect. Hopefully the right people are listening. When I was in 7th grade, I used to have Casey in my class. And I used to have a huge crush on her. Like, I didn't want to say anything because I was so shy, because she was so blonde and blue-eyed. She was like California beach girl. Like not just a California blonde beach girl, like the fine, and her legs were built like a tank. She was just like beautiful, and a very beautiful face, and symmetrical, just beautiful. And I remember her willing to talk to me, because I was like, had this black hair, and I was just like, I was so nervous, because like, you're not allowed to talk to me, you're white. And she was like the only girl like that in the entire her and maybe like 3 other blonde girls in the entire, because I went to a Mexican school in DeWitt Perry, and they were all Mexicans. Majority was all Mexican. And I noticed that Casey came in. This is what I want to talk about. Casey came into class one day, and she sat right behind me. And I remember the teacher was kind of hoping, and I could see Miss Hine over there, and she was kind of like hoping that, like, wow, he's gonna get him a, he's gonna get him a girl. I could see he's looking at her, and I could see that was why, because the teacher saw me looking at her, and I recall that Casey ended up coming into class, and Casey, when I was in 7th grade, I was already 13 years old. And I already failed once in 1st grade, and I don't know if I started school late or not, but I was naturally started in school. I would have already been like 6 months older than the other kids or something like that, but I was already 13 years old. When I was 12 years old, my dad committed suicide. I turned 13 in 6th grade, and then I was turning 14 at the end of 7th grade, entering 8th grade at 14 years old. So whenever I was when I was in my class, she came in one day, and I asked how old she was, and she had just turned 11. She had just turned 12, but I'm gonna say she was 11. She was like just turned 12 years old, like just turned 12. Or she was like 11 years old, because she was like a year younger than I was, or a year and a half, or something like that. But she was young. She was not. I was a year older than her, that's for sure. So I was 13. She was just turned 12, or it was late 11, and she came into class, and she looked a few times like she was highly overstimulated. The same look and expression where a girl has a tremendous amount of orgasms and sex. She gets really, really plush, like a red surface, because your red blood cells just surface into your skin. You're very plush, you're very red, and you're stimulated. Like, you can tell she's like stimulated, and she comes into class, and I remember she wasn't like smiling at everybody, but you could 100%, she was just walking, like she was just like stimulated. Like, you could just tell that she wasn't overly expressive with other people or wanted to express it. You could tell it was by force. Now, I used to recall her that when she was sitting behind me, because she talked to me, and when I was talking to her, and she was very nice, and she was very nice, almost kind of like had this sort of character of someone that's sort of wants to talk very nice, puppy talk nice to me. It was very unusual, because the white girls necessarily didn't want to talk to me that way. And it was one of the first kind of interactions I come across someone like that. So, because blue eyes, white skin, and she had natural blonde hair, I want to say. She could have been dyeing it, but it was natural platinum, and nearly. I know that she had some troubles in her life with her mother, really bad. Her dad was like a drunk, and when her hunting, she talked about her dad taking her hunting and got her all bloody, and threw blood on her from the animals to toughen her up or something like that, because she talked about it in class. But I wanted to say that because if she was 12 to 11 years old, somebody was having sex with her, and I knew that Brian Yockey didn't show up into the picture until I was in late 7th grade. Somewhere around late 7th grade, I think it was when Brian Yockey showed up, and they were like the love boyfriend. They were like the high school, middle school sweethearts of all the couples anyone ever knew, because they were always together. They were like the couples that never left each other. You ever seen my kids? Us growing up, that everyone had boyfriend and girlfriend broke up or had sex or lost their virginity, but you always rarely found one couple out of 700 kids. They were the one couple that were always together. They were always together. Like, and it was never like they hated each other. It was never that. It seemed always, it seemed very loving toward one another, especially Brian Yockey toward her, protective of her, very protective. He took a very man role very early. It was very, very unusual. And but I want to say that was before he showed up in the picture. And I don't think her dad, because she did have a relationship with her dad, and I never heard anything about that. I do know that she came into class, and for sure, if I have to say, someone was having sex with her. I know that, you know, her dad wouldn't have ever done. I don't know her dad personally, met him a couple of times, but from what her and Daniel Boggs, I don't think he was a child molester of his own daughter. I think it was someone else. That was before Yockey. So she was being raped or molested because the way that she looked like she was highly stimulated. Like, I remember her kind of like just sort of just bathing in this, you know, this I don't understand, can't do nothing about because you're stimulated after so much great sex, and she's, you know, flushing. So could be, maybe she just ate really good, had drank really good vitamins. I don't know. I don't think that was the case, and I thought it was important for me to say something that, you know, there's other problems, other situations that were going on, and you know, whoever it was, however, you know, it's left to her and her family and whatever the situation happened. Because I met her and knew her, and I wasn't absolutely close friends, but I was close. I used to have a lot of good conversations with her other friend, which her name was Pearl. And she used to tell me how she wanted to be a stripper, and she was like a really tall girl. She was a giant. You know, not like a giant, but she was taller than any other girls, and a lot of tall as any of the guys. Was just as tall as the tallest guy in our school at DeWitt Perry in 7th grade. And I used to have these long conversations with her. And she was best friends with Casey in 6th grade when they were like all into, you know, the metallic, all wearing all black goth and black liner lipstick and stuff like that. And she used to tell me she wanted to be a stripper. She used to tell me really intense shit about like highly developed shit. And I was like, and she was really good friends with Casey. So anyway, I thought I would say something about that because, you know, it makes me think that, you know, because there was a lot of stuff that was going on, you know. I thought I saw her when I was in Germany. Was it Germany? I made a pit stop. I think it was I can't remember which airport it was. No, I think it was the UK. No, it wasn't the UK. Was it the UK? Yeah, I think it was the UK. It was in it was the same airport, I want to say, that I took to go to watch the DMC. I can't remember the name off. It's a pretty famous airport, but it's in Europe. And I happened to make a pit stop there. Had to be there for like 12 hours or something. I was just sleeping on a chair. I could have sworn I saw her walking from a distance and wearing her like soccer duffel bag, looking like going to the gym kind of look. And I saw her just slowly walking away, and it looked just like her. I mean, exactly like her. But and as far as I'm going to say anything about this, that I said that I saw her in a magazine that Chris Dotson came over. When Chris Dotson came over to my apartment when I was 20 years old, he came over. He had gotten a brand new Apple iPhone that just came out, because he was a poor kid, but always getting the rich good shit, because he had all this money that he was selling off of weed all the time. He was selling hydro, and he used to be making. I was told he was making like $300 a day. Like, he was getting like $5,000-$6,000, and in like 4 or 5 months had no job, and he was eating all the fabulous restaurants, and he was just making tons of money. And I've seen him Ziploc bags of money. He was like a kingpin kind of attitude, like the fat kingpin kind of mob character, cartoon X-Men character you would think of. Could probably even cut for slightly into the Italian mafia looking kind of attitude. But when he did that for a very long time, until finally that shit started happening to him, because some people were successful and he was only selling to the whites, and that meant he made a lot of money. So that was one of the reasons why, Vegas because he was a dealer for the rich boys, and that's why he could make so much money. But anyway, he showed up to my house. This is long after, and he was still doing it, but not as much. And he showed up with an iPhone, and it was like the first time I'd ever seen any phone like that. They were like $1,000. He's like, man, those phones are expensive, like $1,000 right off the top back then. And he showed me. He goes, yeah, man, it's pretty cool. Look, let me show you. You can do this, and he showed me the mapping. I was like, damn, it's wild. You know, and I just moved into my apartment. It was like I hadn't lived there more than maybe 3 months, and he happened to call me. I don't know, somewhere one day, and I said, yeah, man, come over. And he showed up in his little broken down hatchback, you know, and showed up to my apartment. He hung out for a little bit. I think we could have smoked weed, but he said, dude, I was looking at his magazine. I just happened to come across it out of nowhere, and he came across it, and he took a picture of it, and it was a Casey on a like Harley Davidson motorcycle, and it looked she was sitting on top of it. She didn't show her vagina, and it was her naked, her naked, and it looked exactly like her. I mean, because there are a lot of girls that look like Casey. There's a number of them that do look like. I've seen a few of them. There's a number of the typical type of sort of face structure, the blonde hair, blue eyes, and short and statue. It was kind of somewhat common. But I looked, and he said, dude, that's her, dude. And I looked at it, and I said, dang, that looks exactly like her, dude. He goes, dude, let me tell you, dude, do you think this is Casey, dude? I think this looks just like Casey, doesn't it? And he was showing me, he's like, dude, and it was her just posing, leaning her back on it, posing, and then one that she was just kind of riding, and you could see, you know, her body, and she was, you know, airbrushed or whatever. So I thought I would say that. One of the reasons I didn't say anything is because in the beginning was to see how the characters were and see how she behaved, and I never brought it up to her or Daniel, because I believed that the reason she did that was because she desperately needed the money. And if I had said something to Daniel and I was right, what he was going to do to her was going to be much more worse. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to say anything. And the reason I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to degrade her, because I knew that she was smart. I knew she was already smart, and I knew she was going to be already around guys that were going to want to take advantage of her very easily. But I knew she was very smart. She had been around in a relationship very young for many years, so she understood social relationships very well, better than most people. But I believe she had done that, or some guy showed up with a lot of money, just like to do young girls, and said, here, you know, here's all the money, and get what I want. And I didn't say anything, and I didn't hate her for it. I didn't despise her for it at all. But that's what I thought of it, you know. And so that's generally what I was thinking of when I did see that, you know. Beautiful girl, beautiful. And one day, I think I don't know if I made a video about this, and I talked about it on the phone before. One day I was about 27. I was working for the federal government. This is how tragic this ends up being for me. And I worked for the federal government. I go to Daniel Box's house, and it's just Daniel, and he has, like, I had talked to Daniel and Casey a few times, hanging out off and on, and I could tell that if I was alone with Casey for a period of time, we would have sex, without a doubt. Like, you know, because I always kept my distance from her, and I worked with her at IHOP. I was very professional. It was one of those circumstances in life where other people were not going to allow that to happen, because she could tell the kind of person I was. She was in a relationship for so many years. She was very good at it, very popular as well, and very dedicated to her work, school, and cheerleading and stuff like that. Better than a lot of the other girls. She wanted to participate in high school activity stuff, like where a lot of kids I knew didn't. You know, they do sort of varsity cheerleading. They do what you're supposed to do sort of in school, even though you have your mess ups. But I do recall, you know, one day I went over there, and I don't know if I was smoking. I think I was smoking weed, or I went over there already a few buzz off high, and we smoked a little bit, and it was only the TV on. Danny was in the living room. I was there for maybe 30 minutes, and I was sitting on the couch. Danny was standing on top, she was standing in the TV, and I didn't even know Casey was there that day. And I think I had seen Casey walk for a second and looked at me if I was there, and she saw me, and I don't know if he went to the bathroom for a second and then turned around, and then Danny came back, and then he was standing in front of the TV, and I looked from the living room and I could see a side window. Casey was walking toward me in lingerie, in full-blown lingerie, like naked, ready to have, like we're about to have sex. And I was very surprised of this. And I don't know if she was on drugs. She was, I don't think she was, because she was walking very straight and very firm, like, I want him, you know, like very much. And she was in lingerie, and she was walking, and Dana looked over and goes, "What are you doing?" And he knew that it was, like, you could tell the tension where somebody's knifing between the two, preventing it from happening, because we had the same thing happen to us when we went to dinner at Olive Garden, and I didn't know Daniel was Daniel. I didn't know. I thought he was actually having sex with her, which makes me even more upset because I wanted Casey, right? So anyway, but I was always respected, and that's what you get for, that's what I get for being, the low level, alpha dog. So she walks and then she turns around, and we're in the living room, and I knew what was going to happen. I was just kind of like, and I saw her like naked, like, and you could see, I think, some of her nipples when she walked, and it was 100%. She was like, she knew what she was. She didn't look on any kind of drugs, and I was just like, is this really happening? Like, and so Daniel is like, I think I stood up, or after she turned around, she looked at me after, and he said, "What are you doing?" Like, he was telling her to go away from me, and then she goes and she turns around, like she was upset at him, and goes somewhere and goes back to where she was going, and I don't know if she was signaling him to leave or what, but Daniel looks over at me and goes, "Hector," and he's looking over, like, kind of like, "Hector, why don't you leave?" And that's what he said. And I was like, "Oh, sorry, man." He saw me look at it and said, "Hey, I'm sorry," because I thought they were about to have sex, and I didn't know that. I thought Daniel and her were about to have sex at first, because I thought she didn't know that I was in the house. That's what I thought. But she knew. And so that was the end of it. I got up and left, and he got really pissed because he didn't want me to touch her. So there was also the situation that was built up. We went to go to dinner at Olive Garden with Alicia, Mary, and all this, and Casey was sitting next to me, Daniel was on the other side, but I have to always make Daniel the man, because that's his girl, I'm his friend, he has kids with her, there's no understanding of anything else. And we began ordering food, and Casey, she gravitated toward me, she starts to look at, like, we were sort of like a couple, and I felt like me and Dana are going to fight this out. We're going to physically have to fight, because he's going to get pissed off because that's his girl, and he has to put her on lockdown. And I'm thinking, like, she's probably cheated on him a number of times, she's gravitating to other men, and he just doesn't want it to be with me, he wants to keep her on lockdown. So that's and she, you could tell, and I kind of looked at her, and I kind of did a body language and expression, and I kind of just looked this way at the menu so that it didn't make it look like, and Alicia and Mary right there were thinking to themselves, like, oh, he probably was cheating on her and having sex with her now too, because Raquel did the same thing with Richard, and I was just taking other girls away from other guys. But it looked very much like Daniel was like, was thinking to myself, it didn't make it look like he was the guy anymore, because whatever he fucked up in, he was no longer fitting for her, and she was showing that she wanted something else, and she did it right in front of me, like we were ordering, and she wanted, like, to say we were. I felt the vibes, like, very much, but I couldn't express it because I'm thinking, when you do that in front of a couple and you do that in front of, again, especially since it already happened and they knew, that makes me look like a traitor. That makes me look untrustworthy. That makes me look uncertainty. That makes me look all these things. So, and then I have to upgrade my professionalism when I speak and where I'm working and all these other things because of what's happening. So, you know, and it bothered me because I was like, gosh, I wish it could have been. But all I was thinking of, I was just like, because they have kids, you know, like, because they have kids, and I'm like, she has kids with this guy, Daniel, who I've known forever, and she's doing this in front of me, like, and I'm like, and I'm thinking like, oh no, now they're probably gonna think I'm a child molester too, you know, you're white and I'm Mexican, but I felt bad at that time. I felt really bad, you know, and I had to be sort of professional at the time. I felt bad about it, but you know, she sadly passed away, you know, but like I said, I'd always seen her, and there was never any bad conflict, you know, and she was always around a group of people. It was just because I was the Mexican kid with a mustache. I was a Mexican mustache kid with a blonde white girl. And they, you know, they play the whole varsity white boy shit, you know, which she knew other boys, other guys that I knew she dated, like, you know, what's his name, William, Little Will, or whatever they call him, Will, I can't remember his name right now, but Will used to come over, smoke weed, drive his truck, and did drugs with him a number of times, and he was friends with this other guy named Chris, you know, and he was told all the time, he always told me about how much he loved Casey loved, and I would just look at him like, you know, I was like, damn, you know, this guy's a white guy, and he was joining the military, I think, but he ended up, I think, joining the military, and I remember that guy very well, you know, he was just all about Casey and how much he loved Casey, and Casey just like, you don't understand, I love Casey so much, and they looked like they would have made a great couple. He was a blonde-haired white guy too. Blonde-haired white guy too. I knew my distance, you know, and I was like, yeah, I know. And it would bother me at times to say that I worked with her and I was around her because of my black hair, and because I was a mustache Mexican, you know, the tortilla bean, refried beans Mexican shithole that works in construction. And I didn't work in construction, but I was like nearly almost wetback to these white boys. So I ended up, I thought I would say that. I thought I would make a conversation about that situation, you know, during that situation. But she sat in the back seat of my car, and I could tell she was, you know, like, when you do that to a girl, like, she gets very strong and prominent, like tiger shit, you know, look in the eyes, like, you don't think you know who I am, or think, but it was Daniel, the fact that he's in the, you know, she seemed to be bathing Daniel like she was taking care of him like a baby, but like I said, I knew by far she had a lot of guys, older probably guys, that were taking advantage of her without a doubt. I knew she was, always felt that she was because she had an understanding of relationships, because she was in a relationship from 7th grade, from 12 years old all the way to 19, 18 years old. When I knew her, she was always 24 hours around Brian Yaki, and then Daniel Box used to tell me how much he loved her before he ever knew who she was. And it was always this conflict, you know, that I knew who she was and it bothered other people. But when you're fresh and young, it's more hurtful. When you're old, it's not so much. So, you know, I do recall that. But I knew, I knew the story. You know, I knew she was going to have to be responsible because, you know, she had a long-time boyfriend. He was really, really extremely aggressive and protective of her. But I knew a lot of the sex stories. You know, when I was 13 years old, Brian Yaki's telling me how they would have sex they would just lay in bed. And Daniel would tell me this, that they would just lay in bed for 6 hours, 8 hours a day and just have sex. Just literally just sex for several hours, take a break, lunch break, you know, and just sex all day, even eat lunch in bed and just sex for like 8 hours, for like 12 hours, just marathon sex. and but I never thought of it like she was nasty. I never thought of it. I never thought anything degrading to her vagina because of it. Never did. Never did. I was just like she was just having. She was having sex. She was considered like the A class to me, at least in the world that I lived in, and to other people as well, because I could see how people deterred me away from those people very quickly. But yeah, I do recognize, and you know, I knew a lot of the stories because a lot of people she knew, I knew. I used to always see her walk. Brian Yockey used to put her on her pegs and drive her all the way to her house, and so on. So yeah, so that's what I had to say with that particular situation. So and Brian Yockey was not scared. I had three friends or a couple of friends seen Brian Yockey literally with a broken cast, punching a fucking window until he broke his hand, trying to save Casey from other guy trying to take her away from her. I mean, that was a very protective guy, and he had no problem charging at people, no problem. I mean, and they looked like high school sweethearts. It was high school sweethearts. You couldn't have seen a better looking couple together that was like what everybody would have liked growing up. You know how everybody is in middle school and high school and they see the two sort of really cool, handsome looking couples together, and they did match together very well, like Barbie and Ken kind of. That's exactly what it looked like, very much so, but it looked very natural, very natural. So, thought I'd share that and that story. I think there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I don't remember. I don't know, I'll make another video about it. Hopefully this keeps you entertained for now.